Welcome to Beyond the Rankings. I'm your host, Zareh Kantzabedian. This is your Week 7 Start-Sit Show. This episode is brought to you by the Fast Draft app, your go-to for the quickest and easiest DFS games out there. Head over to Fast Draft app and start drafting faster today. Be sure to use promo code 32BW to get a deposit match on your first deposit. Let's get into this week's starts. At QB position, Matthew Stafford at the Jacksonville Jaguars. His ECR this week is QB 14. I think he's being a bit underrated this week. The Jags just got carved up by Sam Darnold. Darnold finished as the QB 8 in week 6. This week, granted, Stafford may be without Puka Nacua for this matchup, but he will still have Devontae Adams, and Tutu Atwell will be returning this week. Now, granted, Adams is going to get fed, right? And Adams, I think, still has it as a receiver. But Atwell should get open deep against a vulnerable Jacksonville secondary. Greg Newsome, who was just acquired by the Jags from the Browns, he's been the 6th most targeted DB on passes that have traveled 20 air yards or more, and he has given up the 7th most air yards on said deep passes. Stafford ranks 2nd in pass attempts, passing yards, and adjusted completion percentage on passes that have traveled 20 air yards or more. Stafford has a legitimate chance to finish as a QB1 this week. At sit at the quarterback position, CJ Stroud at the Seattle Seahawks. ECR QB 16. So it seems like consensus rankings are about, they're down on him, but there might be some managers out there who are tempted to start Stroud based off of his QB1 overall performance versus the Baltimore Ravens. Versus the Ravens, he faced pressure on 15% of his pass attempts, which was lower than usual for Stroud, which allowed him to have, a higher completion percentage and just overall success in that game. Normally, Stroud faces pressure on 21% of his pass attempts. So he saw a 6% decrease of pressure on all of his pass attempts, which may not seem like a lot, but that is actually a significant percentage. Seattle is much better at generating pressure, and Houston's pass protection this year is one of the league's worst. Trevor Lawrence faced Seattle in week 6, and he absorbed 7 sacks while facing pressure on 43% of his pass attempts. Before week 6, Lawrence faced pressure on 20% of his throws. So Lawrence faced pressure on 43% of his pass attempts, which is nearly half. Now imagine a guy like CJ Stroud, who has one of the league's worst pass protection. I mean, this CJ Stroud got sacked on a run play versus like the Bucks or something, or the Titans in week 4, right? I mean, it's so bad over there. So I'm terrified for CJ Stroud this week. Don't be tempted to start Stroud based on his QB1 finish 2 weeks ago. It was a fugazi performance, right? So like in other words, a fake performance. Stroud should have little time to throw this week, leading to many low yardage throws under excessive pressure. My running back starts this week are we're going to go back to the well again and go for Woody Marks again at the Seattle Seahawks. I know I just said to not start his counterpart, his QB, CJ Stroud, but I think it's a different story this week with Woody Marks. And look, if you have top 24 running backs, right, you're starting them. I don't think you necessarily need me to tell you to start those guys. If you do, reach out to me on X and we'll discuss it. But if your team is stacked, you might be facing a tougher start-sit decision in your flex. Otherwise, I think you're starting general top 24 running backs, which is why we're diving a little bit deeper with Woody Marks. Nick Chubb this week Woody Marks right now is ECR 34, which is exactly my point, which is what I'm saying. We're going to dive deeper. Nick Chubb this week, he's not going to find the same success this week as he did in week 5 versus a devastated Baltimore Ravens defensive front. If Houston knew to exploit the interior of Baltimore's defensive front, then they already know that they are going to have to work around Seattle's defensive front and not through it. Seattle is in the top 2 in EPA per rush allowed to opposing running backs, which means they're a top 2 defensive front versus the rush, right? They're not easy to run on. Seattle's top 2 interior linemen have been wreaking havoc. Leonard Williams and Byron Murphy II are going to make it a daunting task, to say the least, for Houston's offensive line. This is where Woody Marks comes in. Right now, Marks is a better athlete, which I think makes him a better perimeter runner in space. His services as a receiver, though, are what will be needed for this game. Houston should not get out to a lead at any point, and Seattle's defensive line is going to shut down any interior runs from Houston, rendering Nick Chubb essentially useless for this matchup. Betting on running back success based on projected game script is a gamble, and it really it's like a 50-50 payoff, maybe even less. But still, if you need an emergency flex, then I think you could turn to Woody Marks as a player who should help Houston matriculate the ball downfield through his receiving. And, we just discussed CJ Stroud getting under pressure a lot. I think Woody Marks will be a nice hot read outlet for Marks this week. My running back to sit this week, Zonovan Knight versus the Green Bay Packers. ECR running back 31. Knight got the nod as a nominal starter in week 6 versus the Indianapolis Colts, yet he barely outsnapped Michael Carter 50 to 44%. Michael Carter owning the 44% share of the touches, or snap share. Even though Knight got the touchdown, he was utilized purely as an early down runner. Right, I think the plan was for, in an ideal sense, for the Cardinals to get to a lead and Knight just to kind of pound the ball. But, naturally they fell to one of the highest EPA offensive teams in the league, to the Colts, and had started to trail. And that's where Carter came in. He's the preferred receiver on the team between the two backs. Carter ran 7 more routes, and received 3 more targets than Zonovan Knight did. Green Bay is a 6.5 road favorite versus the Cardinals this week, and that spread actually grew by 5 points after opening as 1.5 favorites. If the Packers jump out to a lead, and they should, a heavy dose of Carter should be expected as Arizona finds itself in catch-up mode. We're going to take a quick break, and we're going to get back to the rest of the starts and sits for this week.
It is 32 Beat Writers season, August, when they can make you a lot of money, especially on a platform like Fast Draft. Doesn't have hundreds of best ball bro killers. So when there's an injury and you hear about it through 32 Beat Writers, you can run to the Fast Draft app and jump into a Flex 4 game. Just draft any 6 Flex players. Top 4 enter your lineup every week. Or the Rabbit, 15-round best ball. Get your quarterback wide receiver stacks, get your running back sleepers. And if you follow 32 Beat Writers, you can jump into these draft rooms and be like, oh my God, I'm avoiding this guy at all costs, and I'm gobbling up all of this other running back before the larger public is fully aware, has fully digested the ramifications of the information that 32 Beat Writers is sharing. So go get Fast Draft, type in that code 32BW. 32BW is the code. Get you a $50 deposit match on Fast Draft. Now let's go start drafting faster.
All right. Thank you, Matthew Kelly, for that. Always a pleasure to have on the show. At wide receiver, my start of the week is Jameson Williams versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We saw Jameson Williams start to get off to a nice little start. I think he had above 60 yards and a touchdown last week versus the Kansas City Chiefs. And he had success versus their zone shell coverage last week in the interior portions of the field. Right now, he's a wide receiver 28 on the year, and understandably so. Amon-Ra St. Brown is still the lead dog in that receiving core. I'm not saying he isn't, but I think we're entering somewhat of a nice little window in the Lions' schedule where Jameson Williams might see an uptick in passes. And this week is going to be a good week for him against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in what is projected to be the second highest scoring game of the week. William this week faces a favorable matchup against a zone-heavy defense by the Bucs. Amon-Ra St. Brown remains the primary target for the Lions. However, Williams, his performances differ significantly between man and zone coverage. Williams versus man coverage on the year, he only has 2 receptions for 38 yards, totaling 5.8 fantasy points. Against zone, though, he has 9 receptions for 185 yards, resulting in 33.5 fantasy points. In summary, he's averaging 0.16 fantasy points per route run versus man, as opposed to 0.2 fantasy points per route run versus zone coverage. Now, most wide receivers, you're going to see most of them have they perform better in zone coverage than man, but there isn't a bigger performance discrepancy or disparity between the two coverage than Jameson Williams is. I think the Bucks play zone coverage at the 10th highest rate at 76%. I think Williams is in a terrific blow-up spot this week and should be started as a high confidence flex. My wide receiver sit this week is Wan'Dale Robinson, ECR wide receiver 29. Robinson has proved himself to be somewhat of a viable flex this year. He's had a couple of spike weeks, and in those weeks he's finished as a wide receiver 5 and wide receiver 9. That wide receiver 5 performance was against the Dallas secondary, and the wide receiver 9 was against the Eagles last Thursday Night Football. He currently leads the Giants in targets, and they are seemingly surging as a team coming off a massive upset victory at home versus the Philadelphia Eagles. The matchup this week won't be the same, though. They face the Denver Broncos, and they have to travel to Denver this week to face the league's top secondary. Robinson specifically will be matched up against slot defensive back Jaquan McMillan. McMillan is allowing an average of just 20 yards per game to opposing slot wide receivers and a low quarterback rating of 73% when targeted. The Giants are playing great defensively, and I think that's going to result to the Giants are playing great defensively and may also limit the Broncos' offense, which I think is going to result in equal possession time by both offenses. I think it's going to encourage more of a ground game. I think it would be unwise for the Giants to put the ball in the air too much unless forced to do so by a game script. This could encourage a conservative run game approach for the Giants, leading to low pass volume for Robinson this week. At tight end, Cade Otton is my start. Now, I originally wrote this thinking that Mike Evans was going to be out of the lineup, and he was seen as a limited participant as of Thursday's practice. Still, I like Cade Otton, but not as much as before. Regardless, we're going to talk about him. His ECR right now, his expert consensus ranking is tight end 13. Emeka Egbuka and Chris Godwin are still going to most likely be out versus the Detroit Lions. In 2024, Evans and Godwin were absent from the lineups for 4 weeks, right? During that span, Otton was a tight end 1 and an overall top 4 pass catcher in fantasy football. And he was also top 4 in targets behind CeeDee Lamb, Jamar Chase, and Calvin Ridley during the time that Mike Evans and Chris Godwin were out of the lineup. During those 4 weeks, Otton received a 24% target share and a target per route run rate, which equated to tight end 1 volume, right? And that now might be shaved down a bit with Evans coming back, but we'll see how he's used. There's a possibility that Evans might be being forced to return to the lineup given the injuries to Egbuka and Godwin. And I think we've seen the Bucs do this. Last year, I believe it was against the Saints, Evans tweaked his hamstring, and then it was a low-grade tweak, and he should have been rested, but he returned to play against the Falcons, where he caught a touchdown pass, but on that touchdown pass, he severely damaged his hamstring, which forced him to miss, I think, about 3 weeks. So we could see maybe Evans as more of a decoy or a limited snap count. He has an extensive history of hamstring injuries. So Cade Otton might still be the beneficiary. It might be a nice little sleeper. This week's game against the Lions is expected to be the second highest scoring game of the week. Detroit has been a moderate matchup for opposing tight ends. However, notable tight ends such as Tucker Kraft, Mark Andrews, and Travis Kelce have enjoyed solid production against them. Otton would have been the primary beneficiary of a large number of targets in a game where Tampa is going to be projected to be trailing in this game. My tight end sit of the week, TJ Hawkinson versus the Philadelphia Eagles, ECR tight end 16. Now, the Eagles are a team that are not vulnerable to tight ends. Against tight ends, their linebackers have ranked first against the position, and their safeties have ranked fourth against the position. Fourth most difficult, right? Hawk's 2024 performance hasn't been great. He's been having a down year. He's managed to have only one top 5 week, and that was against the Cincinnati Bengals in week 3 in Minnesota. Outside of that, he's finished no better than the tight end 18. Among tight ends, Hawkinson ranks 21st in targets and 15th in target share. Jordan Addison being back in the lineup also does not help matters. Carson Wentz is currently dealing with a shoulder injury behind a horrendous offensive line and will be under constant pressure for this matchup. He may not even be able to finish the game if he receives too much punishment. And we still don't know what's happening with JJ McCarthy. So there's a chance that Carson Wentz may not even be able to finish this game, and we might have a third string quarterback coming in to help do mop-up duties. That's it for the show today. I want to thank you all for watching again. I'd encourage you guys all to subscribe to the 32 Beat Writers website. Follow us on Twitter, YouTube, and what's the last one? Spotify. I want to thank Matt Olson also for creating these awesome banners that we get to use today for the show. He's been really just a great help in getting the show up, running. And Zach's been awesome sending out the mail letter. Also, I'd like to send a message out to my opponent this week. If you're watching, Kevin, I apologize for what I'm about to do to your team and knock you down to 4-3. You can. It's a shame that we don't play each other twice. Maybe you might have been able to get a rematch, but best of luck this week. All right, guys, thanks for watching. Have a good day.